So this was, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, and Jack Baker and Troy Poteet and I decided that this would be a thing that we needed to do, but we were going to run the trail. Start at New Chota and run all the way to Tahlequah. And so we were just getting on top of Mont Eagle there, you know, in Tennessee, the big long hill, and at that point, Troy's turbine came unwound, and he got stuck in spokes of Jack's, no, he didn't have spokes. He got tripped, and he fell into the ditch, and I had to give him mouth to mouth. It was just an ugly, bad situation. And so we decided maybe we ought to let the young people do this. And I suggested that maybe instead of running, it might be easier if they did it by bicycle. So that's really how it got started. Now, Jack, did I get that? No? Perfect, okay, good. Today we do have a wonderful panel of folks that are going to talk about their experience on the trail, and I think it's emblematic of the efforts of the Trail of Tears Association to be inclusive of all the tribes, and I'm particularly pleased to see that today. We have on the panel John Beaver, who is with the Muskogee Creek Nation, Sarah Holcomb with the Cherokee Nation, and Billy Eagle Road with the Choctaw Nation. I'm going to let each one of them speak 15 or 20 minutes, and if you start rambling, I'll give you this, or I'll say shut up, one of the two. And then after they each talk, then we'll have time for questions. So hold your questions till they get through. And I think we should have ladies first. So Sarah.
My name is Sarah Holcomb. I'm from Bayan, Oklahoma. And currently I work in Tahlequah, Oklahoma at the Immersion Charter School, Cherokee Immersion Charter School. And I first started the bike ride when I was 19 years old, I believe. And I was asked by a friend who was helping Todd Enlow put on the program. He said, I heard that your mother did this back in '84. And he said, would you like to do this? I was very hesitant. To bike 1,000 miles, you would think, I don't think I can do that. But I talked to my mother about it, and she said that it's the time and effort that you want to put into it. If it's truly something you can do it. So I decided that, okay, I will do this. And it was at the very last minute, so I only got to train for maybe like 3 weeks before the ride. We left on June 29th, I believe. And whenever I started training, about the first week, I was like, okay, I can do this. This isn't bad. And as we started going on and doing longer training, we started at about 10 miles, then we went to 25, and then we went to 50 miles. It got bigger and bigger. And it started hitting me, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. And at the time, the first year, I was the only female out of 7 other men. And I was very scared, and of course I'm a daddy's girl, so I was afraid to leave home. And when we started the journey, it was very scary. The very first morning, I remember waking up and thinking, this is the first day we're going to ride 50 miles, and we're going to start retracing the trails. And we started in New Chota. And I remember getting there, and I had actually years before, I was brought up very traditionally. Cherokee was my first language, and my parents were always really good at teaching me where I came from, and that we did have ancestors that came over from, all around Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina. And so way before, my parents had actually taken me to New Chota, Red Clay, and all that, so I had been there before. And that very first day that we started, we did our prayer, and we started to get going, and it was very hot. But then the first 20 miles, I thought, what have I got myself into? This is difficult. These are different hills than in Oklahoma. And we started off, and I remember getting really hot. going up hills. You know, the boys were leaving me, and I tried my best to stay up with them. And I started getting down on myself, saying, "This is," you know, a lot of people saying she's the only girl. I don't know if she can do this. You know, I don't. Yeah. So it started getting to me, and as it started getting, you know, whenever I started going again, it felt like, you know, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this. But you know, Todd Enlow sat down and talked to me. He said, you know, I want you to think about this. How did your ancestors feel whenever they were walking this? They didn't have a clue where they were going. All they knew that someone was leading them somewhere that they had to follow. They didn't know where they was going to finish, when they were going to get to eat, when they were going to get to sleep at all. You know, and they were cold and barely had anything. And I had the luxury of someone leading me, someone feeding me every time I stopped, and always had water. So that's when it really hit me that I'm doing this for much bigger things than why I'm acting like a baby. So as the days went on, it got tougher, but it helped a lot that I would look back on this and realize why I was doing this. I was doing it for my people, for myself, and it really hit home. And after I finished the ride, I felt like I could do anything. And the first ride was really getting to know myself and, you know, the culture around me, because, you know, when I was younger, I was taught all this, but as I got older, you know, a lot of teenagers, they get into different things, you know, they forget about who they are, and I felt like I was losing myself and where I came from. So to do this, and I actually did it 5 times. The second year, I was able to mentor and watch these other students come up and learn about themselves and help them push it. And for them to sit there, and a lot of them found out they were actually descendants of these ancestors with the places that we were visiting. And to see them, for them to really connect and see that this is where their actual blood, you know, their family had come through. A lot of them, you know, would, you know, start tearing up and start crying and realize, you know, wow, this is, it really hits it for them, you know. And it is such a joy to watch that. I love that. There's a lot of times that I know that I was helping riders and they were getting really down on themselves, that I had a hard time, you know, telling them, we got to do this, we got to keep going, you know, and everybody, and to watch everyone come together and bring each other together and pull each other. And this is really, I feel like this is what I really wanted to do. I'm starting to babble now. This whole experience has really built me as a person. It helped me get back to school. It helped me get back to myself, where I came from. This is mine. We can't ever forget what happened. You know, in our jerseys it always says never forget. And once these students go on this, they don't. This is something they will never ever forget. It really binds us. And as people, this tells us how strong we are. And I'm really, really proud to be a part of this. To know that so many people support us. And I recognize a lot of faces that, with several places that we have stopped by, that you were there and you support us. A lot of you I see every year since I've been on the bike ride. And that means so much to us, to know that so many people support this and that they want us to finish this. So that was my spiel. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay. Stongo Hinsjay, John Beaver, Jahadiv Gros. Good morning, my name is John Beaver, and I'm from the Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm currently the director and curator of our museum program. speaking on our ride experience, last year was the first one at the Muskogee Creek Nation. We developed I guess a removal ride with bicycles, and it was not entirely an idea that we sort of came up with in our department. People kind of had approached our department about doing a project involving the removal, and actually, quite honestly, just from a personal standpoint, can't speak for all. I don't propose to speak for all Native peoples, especially those in Oklahoma. I've always had a sort of an ambivalent attitude, I guess, toward the removal and the trail and what that may or may not mean. So I did initially approach the concept, the idea of this of doing something at the Creek Nation, before the Creek Nation, with some trepidation, or how it was that we were going to, how this department was going to, that I work in, was going to approach that. But the important thing, when we looked at it and the concept behind it, we called ours Okmulgee to Okmulgee. That's the idea that we sort of honed in upon. And it was less about, while it was honoring, that's what we said, we honor our ancestors who made the trail from our homelands in Georgia and Alabama to Oklahoma. So we wanted to do something that certainly recognized that, but at least at home, we tried to add another spin on what the concept of a ride might mean. So we took it back a little further in history. So I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here, but for those of you who may not know, the Muskogee Creek Nation of Muskogee people, the tribe I'm from, our homelands are in Georgia and Alabama, and we're descendants of the Mississippian mound culture. And so we wanted to take that concept, get the idea of what that meant, if this is going to be focused on history, sort of an interactive approach to it, and take it back a little bit further, and rather than focus on the historic period per se, that was more of a sort of the center part of the project. But we started at Okmulgee Mounds for a reason. We wanted to acknowledge where we came from, that was a part of our deep history, and a lot of my training. Forgot to say, my training is in anthropology and archaeology. I'm finishing up my PhD in that field. I did my my archaeology field work in Alabama and in Georgia, historic creek sites. So I wasn't completely unfamiliar. I wanted to acknowledge that part of, I guess I would say my education, put it to use in a project like this, and be active in this project like this. So I know there's been some, and we were familiar that there's been some ambivalence, if you will, to recognize that Muskogean speaking peoples, their direct ties to the Mississippian culture. But we don't deny that. We recognize that that's where we come from. In fact, we have at our tribal offices in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, conveniently enough, we have a mound building where our national council and our court operates out of that building. So in the present day, we acknowledge that we come from the mound building culture. So we wanted to acknowledge that. So it was a very clear reason, distinct reason why we started at Okmulgee Mounds in Macon, Georgia. And so we we thought, since we're going to end the ride in our current national capital, which is Okmulgee, Oklahoma, the concept then sort of grew out of that. We rode from Okmulgee Mounds to Okmulgee, Oklahoma. So that's the acknowledgement of our deep past, and then also brings us to our present and also our future. That's where we're going to be. And it spun off from there. The trail was kind of a centerpiece to that. And so we did working with some groups that along the way during the project, we did encounter some concern that you guys aren't riding the exact trail per se. We did a close approximation given where roads and where we could ride in present day, but it was less about being on the exact coordinates where our people walked, more so what it was about the educational centerpiece component of what this project was about. And so the centerpiece of that was we approached it in a very positive way, but while maintaining our own positions and our ties to our own history. Because to put it bluntly, I mean, even though we're currently removed from the states of Georgia and Alabama, we've actually, although we're removed, our history, we've been there longer than we've been in Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is not our homeland. We still have ties to those places, and so we wanted to send that message out as well. And so again, as my background and training was in these cultural preservation efforts, archaeological efforts, I also wanted to be a part to recognize those that who like the Park Service and the local historical societies who do for their part to work, put in a lot of hard work to what they do to preserve those sites. And so once we got the concept, we visited the Park Service and those local sites in Georgia and Alabama. So our partners during the project were the National Park Service at Mulligan Mounds and the National Park Service at Horseshoe Bend. And so as you can see, Horseshoe Bend really doesn't have a lot to do with the removal per se, and again, yes it does. And so we worked with, in Alabama and Georgia, we also worked with the site of Fort Palouse. We worked with the Alabama Historical Commission there at that site, and we worked with the Historic Chattahoochee Commission out of Phoenix City and Columbus, Georgia, because that was a site where that had some. It was, I guess, an area where creeks were gathered, less so during the first removals that started for us in around the years of 1826 and 1827, but it was also an area that people read about. If you're any familiar with the Second Creek War, we wanted to acknowledge that because that had a very big part in our forced removals, which started in 1836 and ended in 1837. But when we put this project together, we also, expanding out from the local groups here in Jordan, Alabama, coming from an educational standpoint and how we wanted to be interactive, we try to be creative. And I like to say I'm a younger-ish person, but I think I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. So I think that I'm probably have a good 10 to 15 years, maybe on some people on the panel. But we try to put something together that also had some meaning, or that we start at home with what might have meaning with Muskogee people, but also things or issues that might attract other people to other messages and things we focused on. And health was another part of it. It was another, you can't ride a bike for 1,080 miles and the training part of it. And as you're talking about the project leading up to it at home, and health not be a component of that. So it's no big secret that diabetes is a disease that plagues Native communities. So we worked with our own Muskogee Health Department health program at Muskogee Creek Nation to develop some programs leading up to the bike rides. What I was doing, the people who were going through, my diet had changed, what I was doing, how my blood pressure changed over time leading up to this event, and why that was a good thing. We also partnered with the American Diabetes Association out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They partnered with us on a number of projects. We partnered with our veterans program at Muskogee Creek Nation, and then we partnered with, and further in Oklahoma, we partnered with the site manager at Fort Gibson, because that's where we, as a part of the removal, that's where we ended up on the other end. And so we were happy to say it was a success. All these parties came together, and myself, it was a smaller ride this time. I had some apprehension of taking a large crew out on the road when there's lots of unknowns on this, and not to compare it to the initial removals, but there are some very real dangers when you're on a highway and you're traveling 45 miles an hour, up to 50 miles an hour or more down some of these hills. And if I hadn't encountered it before on a bike, I would be, as a program manager, a leader for this, I'd be very apprehensive about taking people unexperienced into the lurch if anyone got hurt. So this first time out was kind of an experiment for this project. But as I said, luckily we had lots of people. The towns we went through, they seemed excited about it. The first day, the Park Service promoted it locally in Macon, so there was lots of local people that came out. I worked with the park manager, the park superintendent there, and we focused on getting the local riding groups to come out. They were local to the Macon area, so they came out. And so when we started, we had our chief, our principal chief, second chief, the administration was out there. The tribe funded a bus full of our senior citizens and elders to come out to see this event or take part in the event. We had members of our, I think I've already said, if I didn't, members of our national council as well came out. And so the Park Service says, well, this is probably, since removal time, is probably the first time we've had this many Muskogee Creek people here here in Macon for an event. So we were pretty happy. We're pretty happy about that. So we started the event there, and the chief had mentioned some apprehension about, on the first day when you start something like this. And it's probably a common thought that goes through all of our minds. We were starting this ride, and so we took off, and it's like, man, John, this is a fine mess. You really got yourself into. How you going to get yourself out of it? Well, the thing is, you have to finish this. You have to finish this thing. But the big surprise that we did have as a part of this event, there was had a lady called me and said her husband was interested in participating in this event. I said, sure, I'm not going to say no, but here's what this is going to entail. So she called me the day before the ride and said, hey, we're here in Macon, we're going to go along with you. And said, sure, all right, come on out. But what I didn't know was that the individual was 68 years old. But to say that, I mean, he was a 68-year-old Marine. And so he ended up, that was a pleasant surprise, and I want to put that out there for those who want to, as we're developing the next phase of this project, if this guy, I mean, he's tough, so I mean, I'll put that out there. But let this be an inspiration to the young people who want to participate in this. The ride itself was about 3 weeks, so we made our way through. Again, we started in Macon, Georgia. We went over to, for those of you who are interested in the route that we took, we started in Macon, Georgia. We made our way over to Columbus. We visited the site. We blogged this. We did interviews. We put this all online so our citizens back home could see it. And so we visited the Fort Mitchell site, and then from there we made our way across to Auburn, and we took a side trek over or down south to Fort Mims. That's a component of our history. We wrote about interviews about our experience there, sort of our interpretation, because that was one of the things we wanted to get in this project, and one of the things that attracted me to the field that I'm in is that history is, to be fair and honest, it can be often one-sided in its presentation about American Indian history. I mean, we're not savages, even though it might seem like that, but we're not. And that, so when you go and visit these sites, there's a lot of things that still says that the savages came out and murdered the pioneers and the settlers. We really wanted to I think one of the blogs I read about that was, said not to take away from what happened there, what's very rarely talked about in these presentations is the same sort of horrors and ills that were visited on by 1812. We're already talking about 200 or 300 years, and the same sorts of things have been visited on Native peoples along the eastern seaboard. So it's not to justify that, but it's just to get that message out there. That we're, at the end of the day, we're sort of we try to express that we're all sort of in this overall experience together. But as I said, we went from there. We made our way across to the Montgomery area. We visited a lot of the towns where we come from. So all of us in the Creek Nation, we all come from our ceremonial grounds and our square grounds. We still acknowledge that whether those grounds are still in existence today, I mean, those things they can go away over time. Some of them have they've shifted to less the square ground, the stomp dance, into sort of the Christianized, or the ceremonial, or the Christian component to that, where the churches are. But as a part of this project, we wanted to get all this information out there. Also, that we don't things like we're stomp dance people, we're not powwow people. We wanted to dispel a lot of the myths about that along the way. The 20 facts, we came up with a list of frequently asked questions that we get. So we wanted to get that. We wanted to sort of try to answer as many of those questions along the way, and let people know that, especially in the states of Georgia and Alabama, it seems that Creek history or Muskogee history sort of ends around 1836, 1837, those areas. And it begins for us in Oklahoma. Again, in Oklahoma history, our history starts when we arrive in Oklahoma. So we tried to, as a part of this project too, we wanted to fill in that gap that we just didn't go away, or that we still have ties to what's happened here, or our sites in Georgia and Alabama. because we do have a very real connection. We're only, and it's not that deep. It's 3 or 4. I think we're at most now. Myself, we're probably about 3 or 4 generations removed from the removal. And so when we talk about, we still have, I mentioned the stomp dances, so we have people, we call them the Mikos, who can still conduct the ceremonies at the stomp grounds. And we had places like, you probably know if you're familiar with this, South Casita and Coweta and Tallahassee or Tulsa. Probably see those in Georgia and Alabama. It's no coincidence or accident that we have those very same town names and site names in Oklahoma, because those are the people from those towns that when they resettled, those are the people from those places and those locations in Georgia and Alabama. And so there is, and while the removal might break that tie a little bit, it doesn't. We still have the ceremonies that take place, and the ceremonies and the stomp dances that were happening at places like Coweta and Casita and Hickory Ground and things like that. While there might be a Hickory Ground in Alabama near Wetumpka, there are Hickory Ground people who still do what they do and what they've always done, because those are lifetime positions at those grounds. So we wanted to sort of get that message across as well. And so it was a 3-week experience, about 2.5 weeks of writing, a 3-week experience. And as I said, we ended up in the deadline that we had was that the administration, we have our Creek Festival. This takes place in mid-June, and so the deadline was we needed to be back by June 21st, one way or another. And so what that meant was a lot of long days of riding, especially once we got to Arkansas. It was about 15, 16, 70 miles a day. Really, that's what that averaged out to. And so we had but to sort of conclude the overall, the concept, the idea behind it was we had two ending points. The trail part of it, the removal part of it that we're talking about. As I mentioned, we worked with Fort Gibson. They were great. They hosted us there under the end of that part of it. So they had our chief and administration again came out and welcomed us back when we arrived at Fort Gibson, which honestly, I got to tell you, it was I want to say surreal, but it was a very sort of strange experience, given what that meant to, what it means to us. It was kind of like while we didn't get our names there at Fort Gibson, it was kind of like I think for a lot of removed people, personally, it was like an Ellis Island type of thing, where again, it was another point where you were being accounted for when you arrived there. And so to try to comprehend that part of it while you're happy to be at home, it's kind of, I don't say like a sad place, but it's not, it doesn't have a great, great sort of emotional sort of personal that means anything. But the second, we ended the project, the Oklahoma part of it, ended the next day. We rode from Muskogee, took the old, for those of you who may be familiar with Oklahoma, we took the old Morris Highway from Muskogee to Okmulgee, and finished the Okmulgee on and that was, I don't know, that was, people ask me, or ask my sort of my personal, my views on that, and or as you end that, or as this first project ended, and it was, I think myself and a colleague of mine, it was like we had two homecomings, I guess. That was one way to put it. One being back in our traditional homelands in Georgia and Alabama. But one thing that I did want to stress was that while all of we're no longer in Georgia and Alabama, it was there was a very emotional sort of part of the homecoming back home, because that's where, when it's all said and done, while there's a certain negative connotation, a very strong negative connotation about the middle part of it, that part of it can't be taken away. That's and would never want to speak from a position of victimization. I'm not a big fan of that, because one of the things we wanted to, and I think everyone wanted to portray in probably the ride projects, was it's about survival. We survived it. The reason to put it bluntly, the reason that I'm honored to be here today and try to live my life accordingly is that the reason I'm sucking down oxygen today is because two people in my family lineage they had the wherewithal to, they made the path. They survived, like many of our people in Oklahoma. So I think, you know, we wanted to, on a personal level, I wanted to, you know, acknowledge that part of it. And so I guess that's a good place to end it for now. But thank you.
Halito, Chifoya, Billy Eagle Road III. Hello, my name is Billy Eagle Road. I work with the Cultural Events Department under Sue Folsom. I'm the cultural coordinator there. I'm going to try to recollect my first ride is last May. I played a lot of Choctaw stickball since then. If anybody's familiar with that, you'd understand. Well, before I transferred to this department, I worked at the Choctaw Nation Hospital in Tallahena, Oklahoma. A lady there works in the ER. Her name is Nancy Jefferson. And I visit the ER quite a bit because I play a lot of sports and I usually ended up with who knows how many injuries. And I always talked to her all the time. She was always my doctor that took care of me. Well, she mentioned an idea to me about the Trail of Tears ride, and she had got the idea from reading her one of her great-great-grandmother's journals from the ride, and she had mentioned some of the areas along the route that they would take, and she got the idea from it, and she was just going to do a ride by herself to honor her. And I was like, well, why can't we just do, you know, extend it out to let other people honor our ancestors as well? And she said, well, that's a good idea. And so we went from there to where she started setting it up, and, you know, we had to go through different departments trying to get funding because it's never been done with the Choctaw Nation before. We had heard other tribes have did it, and so we started from there. My mother, Teresa Eagle Road, Teresa and Marianne Tullier, they also work at the Choctaw Nation Hospital, and her and Nancy Jefferson, they all worked together to put it together. So one of the things they had to do was, you know, also get funding. They got funding through the Go and Lean program we have there. We said, you know, the bike ride, you'd have to train for months. I mean, we were going to ride a little under 500 miles. You can't just go up one day, so I'm going to go out there and ride 500 miles in a 6-day period. There's no way. So we gave them a pitch of training for it, which would, you know, he said the diabetes is, you know, it's real prevalent in our tribes, and it would increase physical fitness, lower the risk of diabetes and hypertension. And then we went to another program, the Go and Green program we have in the Choctaw Nation. You know, an alternate way of travel by cycling, transportation, you know, lower the emissions into the ozone. And so that was 2 ways of getting funding. And then on top of that, we started doing fundraisers. We have multiple fundraisers. We have Paint the Town Pink project that's coming up, the Pink Pajama 5K run, and then we have a Veterans 15K run to honor all the veterans that are currently fighting or that are fallen. So there was our funding there, and then from there we had to get members. We started out in the Tallahena area getting members from there, and I think we had 13 from the hospital that ended up training for it, and they trained, they got the idea, it was 2011, fall 2011, and they trained from there till May of 2012, and as the word got out, we got more people from other areas. I think we got all the way, a man from California had come down. That's the farthest, we didn't know how he heard about it, but he wanted to join us on the ride. So, and as it got more realistic, like we're actually going to be able to do this, people started training more and more. So by January, they were constantly training. They worked their way up from, you know, 5 miles to 10 miles, and you just increase your distance. Eventually, they were going 55 miles every other weekend. And then as the day got closer, they trained and trained more and more. And Me, I had transferred to Durant, Oklahoma by then, so for a period there, I'd say March, that's when I decided I better start training because this ride's coming up. And in my mind, I was like, well, I've been real active. I've done sports all my life. I can probably handle this ride, no problem. So I waited April. All right, I guess I better train. So I started training, and my mom had been training for 5-6 months, and she kept asking me, "You've been training?" "Oh, I've been doing some spin classes and all the other things." And she was like, "Well, are you sure you'll be able to handle the distance?" It's not just the if I can handle it physically, it's the ride time, because you're going to be riding for 4 or 5 hours a day, and then the seats on these bikes, they are so uncomfortable. You don't have no clue. It's just, you can put all the padding in the world on it, it's not going to help you. So I had no clue. I had never rode a bike, and last year was the first time I ever thought about. I mean, I rode a bike, but I never cycling for distance. I've never even thought of it. So I had no clue how I was going to feel. I did a ride in April. We hosted a fundraiser, and we had a 15-mile ride, a 30-mile ride, and a 45-mile ride. And well, I showed up there like, Mom was going to ride it, and I was like, well, I guess I can ride it. I'll try it out. And all right, so we went the 15 miles, and you can stop there and turn around, and you stop there and call it a day. And I was like, well, I'm all right. So I kept going. Other people, there's probably like 3 or 4 other people that kept going. So I followed them up, and we went up. There's a way, Telomina Drive. If anyone's ever heard of Telomina Drive, it's really steep. It is so steep. I had no clue what I was getting into. We went up. That was the next 15 miles. So I was going up the hills. There is a steady incline. I mean, steady for a solid 6 miles. And oh my goodness, I'll never forget that day. Because when I got to the top of that mountain, I was exhausted, and that was only the 30, and then we could keep going and do the 45, and I sat there for 5 or 10 minutes. So you know what? That's another 15 miles. So I ended up going. That's the first time I ever rode for that distance ever in my life, and I was like, okay, well, now I know, and I only got a month to get ready. I better start training. And so came along, May came, and we ended up, our day to go was May 12th, 2012. We had planned to go to Philadelphia, Mississippi. That was our starting point. And like I said before, Nancy had got this route based on her grandmother's journal. So places she had seen or written down in there we were going to try to get a route close to that, as close to that journal route as we could. So that's why we ended up going. Well, the day before was Saturday. My sister was graduating from OU, so everybody else went up that day. And our bike ride, you usually want to start early in the day, because as you're riding, like she said earlier, it gets really hot, and when you're riding that distance, it's easy to get overheated and get exhausted. So usually you want to ride as soon as daybreak, so 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Even if it's still dark, you can have your lights and your flashers and the SAG team. So that day, my sister graduated, so we didn't get to leave OU until I think it was 6 p.m. that night. So we ended up getting to Philadelphia, Mississippi, like 5 in the morning, and our bike ride started at 6:30. So all of us, my mom, as a family thing, I can't believe I forgot to mention that. It ended up just being my mom at first, and then I joined, and then my brother and sister also joined. They joined. They didn't train for it. They decided the week before that they'll try it. So when we got up there, my brother said he wasn't going to do it, but when we got up there, he's whatever I do, he has to do it too. So when we got up there, it was 5 in the morning. We all had needed a shower. We got in there, took a shower, took like a 20-minute nap, and then got out there, got dressed, and started our day. And it was probably one of the worst days to start on because it was cold and rainy. And that just made things, that just made it worse. And me and my brother were like, oh, this is a great first day. So we got out there and we rode. Our original plan was to ride 84 miles for the first day. And that when they told me that, I was like, so if we ride like 60 miles, will that be enough? So we ended up going. My brother decided to ride, and my brother and sister, they would alternate days is what they decided on. So we had a 6-day ride, so they would just alternate days. We ended up riding, and as the day went on, the rain stopped, and my brother and I, we were way ahead of everybody. We were just, you know, if you ever seen cycling, you see people, they draft each other and they just alternate. Because when you're in the front, you're taking the brunt of the wind, and you know you're doing all the work. And the one back behind them is just, you know, they're just kind of coasting, they're just saving your energy. And what you do is a tandem, and you just keep switching, and that saves a lot of energy. Now, if you're out by yourself, which I did a couple of days, it's a bad idea. It's just because then you're wore out constantly. So you usually want a tandem of, you know, 2 or 3 people, and you can just alternate. It saves your legs a lot. So my brother and I, we got way ahead, and you know we were going, and we had no clue where we were going. We had, I think we had 4 or 5 SAG vehicles, but you know we were within. Me and my brother, we were probably the youngest in the group. The other ones were, you know, probably 10, 15 years older, 20 years older. I think the oldest person in our group was 55, maybe 60. There may have been a 61 on there. I'm not sure, but you know. But they could go. They surprised me. I was amazed at how people could train and do it. And then, like I said, we got ahead, and so the SAGs were staying way back. We were probably, I think, when a SAG came by, they said we were like 2 or 3 miles ahead of the group. So we just kept going, and eventually there was this road. I don't know if it was part of the plan, but there was a detour, and my brother and I, we were sitting there. We didn't know what to do. We were like, okay, and we kept waiting for a SAG. We waited 5, 10 minutes, no one came. So we decided to go, so we just went down. I guess we just went, and we ended up going the right way, but it's just a road that was blocked off, and I guess it was an old highway, and we were going, and we ended up in Clinton, Mississippi. It was where we're supposed to be, so I assumed we went the right way, and we got there, and they're like, oh yeah, y'all went the right way, everybody's coming up behind you. I was like, oh, okay, that's good. So that was the first day. And you know, going into it, I was like, oh, that was an easy day. I mean, 84 miles, and after I was done, I didn't feel too bad. And then the second day, we went 60, I think 67. And then I rode with my sister that day. And this day was a rough day. This is probably the roughest day of them all. Because I ended up wrecking twice that day. And then my sister had wrecked as well, and her wreck was bad. She had caught, because these tires are really thin, they're only like that wide. So when we were getting back on the highway, there was just a small enough groove where a tire would fit in, and when she went to pull back on, it got caught, and she kind of flipped over the front. And when we were riding that day, after she went down, I stayed back with her, and even the group went on, I told her to stay back, and then, you know, we fell back probably 10, 15 minutes behind the group, and that day was so windy. And as a cyclist, I would much rather be on hills, up and downs all day, rather than flat the entire way, especially on a windy day, because then you're constantly working then. Even on hills, I mean, you work going up, at least you get the coast on the way down. So that day was rough, because me and my sister, we fell behind, and you know, we're trying to do the tandem, but like I said, she never trained, so you know, she was really tired. And I didn't think we were gonna make it. We have a set deadline to make it each day. You have till, I think it was 2:30 p.m. And if you didn't make it to the end of the day, our SAGs would come and pick you up. So I was like, my goal was to make it every day. And you know, but my sister went down, so I couldn't leave her. So obviously I stayed there, and then we kept riding, and we just kept toughing it out, and we took so many breaks, because because that wind was, I don't know, it was probably a headwind of 30 miles an hour. So it was just, you were working the entire time. And then we kept resting. Then my dad was one of the SAG members, so he came by and asked if we were all right, checking with us every 30 minutes or so. And then he said, well, the time's almost up. Y'all still have about, I think it's about 5 miles. And we were like, we can finish it. We can do it. I know we can do it. And we ended up going through. We just toughed it out, and we made it through town. And it was just like that last 5 miles took forever. It was like the longest 5 miles of my entire life. So we were glad to finish that day. And so that's the second day of the ride. And you know, by this time, I'm starting to get a little fatigued. My muscles are getting a little wore out. So my mom, we all took ice baths. Anybody ever had an ice bath? They're no fun, but amazing for your muscles. So third day we went. I think we were in Arkansas, or we were going to end up in Arkansas. And we ended up going, my brother rode again, and oh, I forgot to tell you about my wrecks, sorry. We were going through a town, and like I said, if traffic is okay, sometimes, most of the time, people are real courteous, and they give you room. So but sometimes you get those people that just, I don't know, I guess they think you're a professional and you can just keep it straight all the time. And they don't give you any room. And so I was going through a town and someone had just pulled right up there, right next to me. It kind of startled me, so I kind of scooted over. And when I did that, there was a groove on the side, and I hit it, and I caught it, and just kind of flew off my bike and landed on my butt. But everybody just kind of looked at me, and I said, oh, I'm fine, pop back up. Well, that wasn't too bad. But my second wreck was when I was drafting behind my brother. Like I said before, the tandem, when you draft, you get within a few inches of the person in front of you, their back tire. So, you know, this is my brother and I, our first time riding really, so, you know, we weren't real comfortable with doing it. So we were doing it, and I told him we did it for a while, and it was almost the end of the day, and, you know, we were way up there, and we were just kind of messing around, you know, just looking around, all that. But we wanted to get real serious, got back in the tandem and started going. And I guess he didn't see me pull in behind him, and he went to look for me. He turned his head and looked. As he did that, he slowed down. So I hit his back tire, and you know, we're probably going like 15, 20 miles an hour, decent pace. And you know, falling off a bike going 15, 20 miles an hour, and it's a pretty good road rash. But thankfully, I had gloves on, and when I just hit my hands and tore up my gloves. And I just got those gloves 2 days earlier, and they're all tore up then. So, but that was my 2 wrecks. And thankfully, they weren't as serious as they could have been. But I get to my 4th day. The 4th day, that morning when I was going to ride, my Achilles had a knot on it. At first it was a little knot. It was just a little bit, and it hurt. And I talked to Nancy, and she said that it's just tendonitis, just from overusing it for those 3 days. Because when you're riding the bike, if you can clip into a bike, or you can have straps on a bike, or you can have no straps. Well, if you clip in, you can change the way you ride. You can like do a pulling motion, you can do a pushing motion. There's different motions you can use. Well, I just had a strap-in bike, so I didn't even think about different motions. I just, it's a bike, you just pedal. So I didn't think much about it. Well, and I kept doing that, and she said, well, just change your motion a bit. So I did a lifting one to take it off the Achilles, but then when you do that, it does a tendon that runs up to your knee, and then, so I did that the entire 4th day to save my Achilles, but that 5th day, both tendons were hurting after that, so I didn't know what to do. So that 5th day, we ended up in Oklahoma, and we were in Broken Bow, and that's where we stopped at. So I was exhausted. My muscles are fatigued. I'm like, well, I thought I could finish this. I need to finish this. I want to finish it. So, like they were saying earlier, like it's just why I have a few. What did my ancestors have to go through? They walked through cold, barefoot, whatever they had to do to make it to their destination. As long as they made it, that's what counted. So I was like, all I gotta do is make it one more day, just one more day. That's all I kept saying, is one more day. So that next morning, my Achilles, at this point, my Achilles tendon had a huge knot on it. I mean, it was like obviously noticeable. Like I'd never seen anything like it before. I didn't know what was going on. I just know that it hurt. It hurt really, really bad. So as I was going up to get ready to ride, everybody was like, "Oh, you probably don't need to ride today." So Savior, I was like, "No," I said, "I can do it." I said, "It's the shortest day. The last day was the shortest day. I think it was 45, 40 miles." So I tried to ride I think I rode the first 5 miles and it was hurting so bad, they loaded me up in the sag van. I was upset, but I couldn't do much about it because I couldn't ride because I literally couldn't even extend my foot. That's how bad it hurt. So, and my mom, she was tough in that. She's still going. I was like, there's no way. I was like, I don't know why I can't keep going. And so I rode in the van for another, I think it was 10 miles, and then we stopped in Neshoba, Oklahoma, there, and we stopped at a store, and I think it was the last bit of our trip, so it was the last day, the last bit, and I was sitting there, I was like, well, we're supposed to ride in anyways as a team, and our team, I didn't mention earlier, the team consisted of 23 people, so we had a pretty good sized team for our first year, which is real surprising, but we're going in, and we're supposed to come in. They're supposed to greet us at Tuskahoma, Oklahoma, which is our capital there, and we usually have our Labor Day festival, if anybody's heard of that, so it's usually the location of it. And they're supposed to have, they had a band, and they had this big welcome home kind of celebration. So I was like, I've got to finish it. I'm going to ride for 5 days and then ride in on the van on the last day. There's no way. I taped it up, I put some BioFreeze on there, I took some medicine, and I was ready to go. They was like, "Are you sure?" I said, "No, I can do it." I said, as we got going, we ended up in just outside Tuskahoma, Oklahoma, and we got everybody together, everybody that rode, and we all lined up. And if you ever seen any kind of cycling competition, how they all line up in a big group, we all lined up, made it all look professional, even though we didn't do it the entire trip, but we tried that last day. So we rode in and everybody welcomed us home, and when we finally finished, the accomplishment, just riding, it was, I think our first is, we had 2 now, but that was our first time, and we rode 434 miles. And just that number itself, it's daunting to even think about when you're like, oh, I'm going to ride 434 miles. I just doesn't, you can't fathom that idea until you do it, and you're like, wow, I really just rode 434 miles. And so when we came in, we were so exhausted, but so happy and just, proud of what we did. We think of how far our ancestors had to walk. We got to ride a bike and have SAG teams along the way to help us get there, but you know how exhausted we were. Imagine how they felt. So we're like, that's really something really to be proud of. And we ended up had our second year. I'll conclude that first ride, and our second year I trained a lot more, needless to say. I was definitely ready for this year, and we did another route. We did a north route, and we ended up going through Arkansas down through Fort Smith to Scullyville was our final destination, our second ride. I won't go through the days on that because I'm probably talking your ear off and you're probably ready for me to get down. So I just want to add some things though. What was it? Oh, I already did that, so we're good. So, I hope I gave you all a good story and maybe something to enjoy. Thank you so much.